Thank you, Josh, for your warm welcome and your grace in all that you are holding this morning, quite literally. Beautiful to see. Kavod habriot, respect for all creatures in our screen today. So it's wonderful to be here this morning and to be leading this meditation in a week in which we continue in the Joseph narrative in our Parshat HaShavua, our weekly Torah portion cycle that guides the undulations of our lives. And this Joseph story in the book of Genesis unfolds over several weeks. And Parshat Vayigash, which we will read from the Shabbat, and we'll be reading from during the week to get ready for Shabbat, is a continuation of this story and contains the poignant moment in which Joseph reveals his identity to his brothers, and this emotional journey of reconciliation and repairing brokenness continues to unfold. One of the most beautiful things about this particular story in the book of Genesis is that it intersects in various ways with the holiday of Hanukkah. And so, of course, Hanukkah ended yesterday at sunset. And so while this parasha doesn't exactly coincide with Hanukkah, the themes of Joseph and the Hanukkah celebration are always kind of present. And so I want to highlight that for us today by sharing an excerpt with you from a poem by the Israeli poet Zelda, in which she so beautifully shares this and highlights this intersection of our celebration of light with what Joseph's unique gifts are to us. And so thank you to Adi for sharing the screen with several texts that I want to share with you today. And I've highlighted a few things, but the first one will be this section of the poem known as Longing Struck by Zelda. And I lit a candle of thanks that Joseph emerged beautiful as the dawn from the humiliation of the pit, that his intelligence, horrified with insult, agreed to again become wise, resumed understanding of the signs, that the brothers' hate did not cause Joseph to forget. Because in my case, with each sorrow, the chambers lock, and sometimes even courtyards of the seasons of the year shut closed. So here, this wonderful poet Zelda it's almost as if this poem was perhaps written for this moment because of having just concluded the Hanukkah celebration, right? We have this section, and I lit a candle of thanks, right? The candles that we lit over these past 8 days were candles of gratitude, candles of thanks. And she's linking this to the Joseph story. What did Joseph do? He was able to emerge as beautiful as the dawn from the humiliation of the pit. And you'll see here that I've highlighted the words that he agreed to again become wise. Right? And so for me, this opportunity to sit is exactly that opportunity. It's an opportunity for me, for us to go internally, to go into our heart space, our soul space, and to once again become wise. If we have gotten off the track, if we have lost our center, if we have lost our way, this is our opportunity. And this is also linked to not forgetting, right? And this is a primary theme of the Joseph story, is that Joseph pleads with various characters in the story, please do not forget me, do not let me be forgotten. And so literally what we're doing when we sit is we are remembering. And if you break out that word, membering, we're membering our body. We are connecting with each part of our body to create wisdom inside of us once again. And then what the poet Zelda does here is she she highlights for us on a personal level, for herself and for us, what can happen when we shut ourselves off through sorrow. She says, because in my case, with each sorrow, the chambers lock, our bodies lock up, our internal capacity to be open can lock up. And sometimes even courtyards of the season of the year shut closed, right? So this remembering or this recommitment to, again, opening up to our internal wisdom is a spiritual antidote, an important spiritual antidote to not closing ourselves off through sorrow or through isolation. So as I thought about this poem, I also was drawn back to this section. And if you want to scroll up just a tiny bit, I think we've got most of the quote there from the Babylonian Talmud. This text was brought to my attention through the Daf Yomi cycle that I'm in, the 7.5-year cycle of studying a page of Talmud every day. And we just recently finished Tractate Rosh Hashanah, actually, just a few weeks ago. And I was so drawn to this section and thinking about how we remember, how we don't forget, and how we repair what is broken and not allow our sorrows to obscure what that could be. So the Talmud says they're talking about what constitutes a shofar that can be blown for the period of the days of awe that we just concluded this September and October. And it says, if one joined shards of various shofars to form one shofar, it is unfit. And let me just pause for a moment. We have broken pieces of different shofarot, right? Multiple shofars. And the temptation might be, we're going to take a piece from here, we're going to take a piece from here from external sources, and we're going to bring those things together to make a new shofar. Nope, according to the Talmud, can't do that. That's not going to be the type of shofar, the type of wholeness that is required, that is spiritually required for the holidays. But Rabbi Natan says, if a punctured shofar, if you have a shofar that has a hole in it, if it is sealed with its own kind of material, the shofar is then fit. Okay, so there's a difference between taking what is integrally a part of that shofar and using that to become a part of the repair. According to the Talmud at this point, that makes the shofar spiritually fit. And my gloss on this is that, and I know there's a typo in there, I think your copy says, when we fix your brokenness, that should be our brokenness, thinking together. When we fix our brokenness, we use the material that we are made of, right? So the message, the spiritual message to me from this section of the Talmud is that everything we need is inside of us to do that type of repair, to remember, to become wise again, to not let our sorrows obscure that. Right? Doesn't mean that we don't need help from the outside. It just means that what we need is inside of us. And this was brought home for me by this quote by Susan Beaumont in a wonderful piece she wrote called In the Grip of Overwhelm. And I provided the link to that. She says, overwhelm wants us to believe that we are alone and incompetent, in danger of going under for the last time. This is a falsehood. We have within us, and here I have highlighted this because I feel it ties into our other text today. We have within us a capacity and an abundance that comes from the divine. Our task is to let go of control and to rediscover the spaciousness and wonder that is already ours for the taking, right? Just like the Talmud says, it's our own material that is within and inside of us. And then two last things to close before we turn our attention to rediscovering our wisdom inside of us and connecting through meditation. The great American rabbi, 20th century Rabbi Milton Steinberg, wrote an incredible sermon called To Hold with Open Arms. And in this sermon, there's a beautiful line that is one of my absolute favorite quotes of all time. And he says that there are texts, there are stories, there are holy narratives that are in us, not only in books that lie on a bookshelf in a Beit Midrash, a house of study, or a library, but these are things that dwell within us in our commonplace experiences. If, he says, we are only wise enough to discern them, right? So books are important. Sifrei Kodesh, holy books of our tradition, are important, but they are no more important, I would say, than what are the Sifrei Kodesh, or the narratives and stories and collective memories that are inside of our own hearts that we can unlock through our own wisdom if we are wise enough to discern them. And then I'll close with this beautiful blessing again from the Talmud that I've really been reflecting on so much lately. Blessed are you, O divine, who did not leave anything lacking from the Holy One's universe. So often when we're in the throes, I guess I would say in the pit of humiliation, right, to use Zelda's language from the poem, we can feel a great sense of lack. But it's through returning to our wisdom, to our internal wisdom, just as Joseph did, that we are able to see that we don't have to view the world as lacking, but that we can view the world as full and abundant for us to discover. So as we turn our attentions to our body, to our internal wisdom, I just want to ask Adi, I think if you can share the link again in the chat, perhaps you've already done that, Adi, but somebody was messaging. Thank you so much for doing that, messaging me to ask for that. So we'll now turn our attention to our bodies, to our breath, to ground ourselves in our chair, on our mat, on our cushion. Perhaps we're lying down. Perhaps we're standing if our bodies won't permit us to lie down or to sit today. And to take an inhale in through the nose, if that's available to you. And to feel the expansion of your pelvis. The wisdom going deep into the kishkas, into your innards, into your belly. And exhaling out. And we'll sit together in silence, and I'll bring us out of the meditation shortly before the mourner's Kaddish. We have within us a capacity and an abundance that comes from the divine. Our task is to let go of control and rediscover the spaciousness and wonder that is already ours for the taking.
Thank you, Susan. I invite you to stay around for a few minutes afterwards. You feel welcome to share reflections or ask questions of Susan after. And we're going to take a moment now to give those who are saying Kaddish a chance to do so. If you'd like to share the name of who you have in mind and heart as you say Kaddish today in the chat, please feel welcome to do so. And also feel invited to unmute, and you can share, you can recite Kaddish along with me. Yitkadal, Yitkadal, Rabbi.
V'chayechon uvimekon uv'dechayde kol Beit Yisrael Ha'agala Bisman Karev Bimru Amen.
Amen.
Shmei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam U'Omeomaya.
Barach,
Yitarach Vishtabach
Man
Hadar
Bitnase,
Vitaman Bitnase
Hadar Vitala,
Tidar
Halal,
Vitale
May
Vitalal Shmei
Kudisha Berkshire,
Le'olam
Mikol
Kol
Berktash,
Bekiratav
Bashirata, Tushkatata,
Ushakata
Benakamata,
Venakamata V'Imaran Be'alma Bimru
Amaran,
Amen.
Amar, Amen.
Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya Chaim
Shalom,
Aleinu V'al Kol
Kadisha,
Israel
Min
Ve'imru
Shemaya,
Amen.
B'Chaim
Ose
Aleinu,
Shalom
V'Kol
B'Marav
Yisrael, B'Ru Amen.
Uyase
Ose
Shalom
Shalom, B'Marav,
Aleinu V'al Kol
Ose
Israel
Shalom,
El
Aleinu,
Kol
Ve'imru
Yoshe
B'Kol
Amen.
Tevel.
Yisrael, B'Kol
Bimru.
Yoshe,
Amen.
Amen.
With me to leave us now and wish you a Seitzman Shalom. We're going to remute. Okay. Farewell, and invite you back. We'll be here again tomorrow, same time, same channel, or whenever you can join us. And thank you for joining us and those who are sticking around. Susan, thank you so much as always. Just you bring the intertextuality, the relationship that you bring is so lovely, in the ways that you're putting those pieces together. And I was particularly struck, as you were, by the image from the shofar of taking from within us. And I wonder if you want to, and those who are listening along, if you want to, in the chat, if you'd like to share a reflection or a question, please do. I'm just going to get us started with my own question of, as you do that practice, how do you try to draw on how do you try to draw on the strengths that you already have, or the strength that you already have, the material that's within you, like to actualize that? Is there a way that you that kind of happens for you, or is that's a part of your practice? I'm curious about that. Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Self-compassion is definitely at the top of the list. And I think it's this tightrope that we walk a little bit of understanding that it's within us, but yet we're not alone. Mm-hmm. So as I'm going internally into my own kishkas, as it were, and my own innards, I'm also remembering that I am not the first person, right, in the company of humanity to go through the things that I'm going through, whether it's the self-doubts or the questions or fears or whatever that is. So those are the things that I'm holding on to right now, for sure. And to also remember that the microcosm in which my spiritual life is can sometimes grow outsized and obscure the rest of the world that is. So while having respect for my own internal journey and my own feelings, to remember that I'm part of a larger whole. And that while those feelings or struggles might feel magnified, that meditation in particular gives me the chance to step back and see myself as part of a larger whole, and to view that my own journey in an appropriate scale to what else is going on in the world and in other people's lives.
It's beautiful, right? And some of what we're carrying within us, right, is all those other people who've come before or who are alongside. And of course, then there's also the question of where the Shekhinah, where the divine presence is within that, right? Mm-hmm. And when you were, as soon as you said it, and you said, like, I'm not alone, I started to think about, right, how we, the non-dualism piece, or the dualism, non-dualism question that comes up for us a lot of, on the one hand, we're here and we are who we are, and on the other, that we are also totally interconnected, and there is a chayut, a life force that is connecting all of us and is breathing through us, and that's our practice can be in service of, as I think you're sort of talking about, touching in with and picking up on and amplifying that sense of connection and not aloneness. Is in your experience, is the aloneness or the loneliness, maybe aloneness and the loneliness are two different things, right? So as the feeling of loneliness, it feels to me that's like related to the overwhelm that you also, brought. I'm curious if that connection is drawn.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Susan Beaumont, this piece that I quoted is from an essay that obviously you can find online. I think someone's requesting the resource sheet again, so maybe I decompose that. But she also wrote a book, I believe I quoted from it in IGS meditation before, called Leading When You Don't Know Where You're Going. And this is actually a book that she wrote about leadership in faith-based communities. Actually, she wrote it before COVID, but it became even more important in light of COVID. And so her work in general really reflects a lot of those, the tensions, I guess, between loneliness and aloneness that you're kind of talking about, Josh, and how we use those words and how we balance that. But I wanted to go back, if I can, to something else you said, because I'm struck what you said about the Shekhinah, this dwelling presence of God in the universe that is an antidote to separation and dualism, right? The idea that there's a division and that we're over here and something else is over here. And I think that what Zelda's doing in the final stanza of this poem is that's when she says, because in my case, with each sorrow, the chambers lock. And to me, when the chambers lock, that's the separation, right? That's not the denial of the Shekhinah, but it's not seeing the Shekhinah, right? When we do that, and when the courtyards of the seasons shut closed, that accessibility that the oneness or the unity could provide us is not available to us.
Yeah.
So I feel like she's describing kind of the, I don't know if we want to say antithesis, because even that is dualistic language, but she's describing what can happen to our hearts when we can't grasp the comfort of Shekhinah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. That's really powerful. Right. And that it's also, I'm thinking about the Surgeon General has a book called Together. Vivek Murthy has a book called Together that he wrote in between his terms as Surgeon General, but where he draws this, he talks about the epidemic of loneliness and disconnection, and how he sees that in a host of medical and social maladies really are linked by this epidemic of loneliness, this crisis of loneliness that he points to and documents. And he does a really good job also of distinguishing between aloneness or solitude and loneliness, right? And then there's a thin line, but a pretty firm line that separates those two, where we're, in our practice, where we're cultivating a sense of solitude, which is actually in service of our feeling held and feeling connected and experiencing that interconnection, as opposed to the loneliness, which is when we feel cut off from that. And so I hear what you're saying very much resonating in that. Yeah. And so if anybody's interested, if you haven't read it already, I mean, it's been out for a while, for a couple of years now, I think, but that book is called Together. I believe, I forget what the rest of comes after the colon, but if you look up Vivek Murthy, Murthy, he's the Surgeon General who was also the Surgeon General during the Obama administration. So I'm getting, we're getting a few reflections. And if you've got questions, we have a couple more minutes to ask, but otherwise we also don't need to, this can take the life that it takes, and that's fine.
Yeah, Josh,
you want to share? Yeah.
I'm looking at one of the comments in there are as many as I can read, which are all important and wonderful, but someone has commented that on this idea of when one is in pain and struggling and someone says, God only gives you as much as you can handle. So I want to be clear that that is not a helpful response in the times in my life when people have said that to me. That is not helpful. And so I think one of the things I want to clarify, one of the dangers in teaching this is I'm not saying that we don't need others' support at all in this, and that we are turning inward, that it is an expression of we have to handle this, and God has some divine plan that we're capable of this, and so it's up to us to make that happen. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that often we don't trust the internal wisdom, or we don't take the time to go inward to actually discover it and uncover it, and that we're too busy self-doubting and that kind of thing. So I just want to say that this is not a case for saying, you've got it all inside you, you can handle this. It's that we're broken, and that by going inside, by carving out that alone time, as Joshua said, that we can rediscover our resources. And part of that may be knowing who and how to ask for help, right? Which is an important distinction of taking the time. That's the wisdom, right, of reconnecting. So many beautiful and important comments there, but I wanted to be sure that I touched on that.
Great. All right. Thank you. That's so, I think, important and helpful, and drawing that distinction, right? That's a subtle but very important nuance that we're getting there. Wonderful. All right, everyone. I'm gonna call it there and say thank you. And again, please join us again tomorrow, or whenever your schedule permits, at 12:30 Eastern Time, 11:30 here in the Central Time Zone, or wherever you are. And wish you many blessings for the rest of your day and your week.
Thank you, Josh.
Okay.